Okay, I just cleaned up the wiring on the back a little bit and tightened down some of the components so they were nice and taut when I go to solder. Everything's going to be locked in place nicely. Alright, now it's just a matter of pretty much a couple solder joints. All these components will be locked in, and then we'll trim off the excess leads of all these components that are really not needed. Some of them are long, some of them are pretty short. Alright, just start soldering all these little parts together. And again, this is your primary input, this whole big junction right here in the center. That's your input. That's where your input red wire is going to go. Okay? So make sure you get a nice good contact between all these components. Okay? Then over here you're just paralleling these three leads. So one little glob on here is nice. Make sure you get all three of them in there. The same thing over on this side. Okay. And then right here, this is your ribbon output. And that's it. So you got pretty much 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 soldering joints for the whole crossover. Put a little extra, it's not going to hurt anything. Okay. Now, any of these little excess leads that we have hanging off, I'm going to trim off because I really don't need a bunch of extra wires hanging out all over the place. Let's see. I'm just going to bend this up a little bit to see what's extra. Okay. That's it for that side. This side's got a little bit of excess, not much. Make sure you don't cut the leads too apart, that would be bad. Okay. And this one over here. Now I'm going to leave these two sticking up for right now because that's going to be our output to our ribbon. So I'm going to leave that just for now. So I've got, if I want to wrap the wires around there, probably going to go right underneath this one, but I'll probably trim that off afterwards. This one can be trimmed back. And these don't stick out very much. I'll probably just leave those. That doesn't bother me too much. Okay. And that's it. That's pretty much your final crossover wiring job. Pretty simple. If you want to twist and tweak all these and make them all perfect and straighten them all out, you can. Then again, nobody's ever going to see it again once it's inside the chassis. So. Okay. Now, for the crossover, we need 3 different wires. The way the instructions are written right now, you're going to need red, which will be your input to your center. You're going to need blue, which is going to go from your coil to your woofers. And then red is going to go from the output of your crossover to your ribbons. Sorry, yellow. Red is input, yellow is output. Sorry. So we're going to take red, yellow, and blue. Those are the 3 we need right now. And I figure about a foot's plenty for what we're going to do. You don't have to go very far inside the chassis for anything. So I'll take about a foot off of each of those. And get your fancy schmancy wire strippers out. That's it for the wires. Now, again, your red's going to go to the center of the crossover right here. So this one, you can either run it under, solder it right to it, do whatever you want. I'm going to go ahead and probably wrap it. Well, the ribbon's going to go up. So I'm going to solder mine parallel to all this. I'm going to strip it back a little bit further too. Give myself a little bit of extra wire. I'm going to twist that, and I'm going to solder it right here to the input. Yeah, Alex is right. This goes down because you're going to go to the binding posts or the XLR. So we'll solder it here or here, going straight down, because your XLR and your binding post are going to be below the crossover. So we're going to tin this first and then solder it right there. Okay, so there's your primary input from either your binding post or your XLR, depending on which one you're going to connect it to. Okay, then you've got your output to your woofer, which is going to be blue. And that leads pretty long, so I'm going to cut back a little extra on here too, do the same thing. I'm going to tin both of these first. Solder that right there. There you go. Now you got your positive in and your woofer out. Make sure they're really connected well. Okay, now the only thing left is your output to the ribbons. And again, like I said, you can either go underneath here, side by side. This one will actually go up towards the ribbon. And then again, it depends on how you position the ribbon in the speaker. It really doesn't matter too much. The terminals are at one end. So if you leave the ribbon up, you're going to be going from the crossover up. If you put it towards the bottom, it'll be kind of coming straight through from the back, so it doesn't really matter either way how you connect it, as long as the wire's long enough to get to it. So I'm just going to go ahead and go up. And peel this back a little more. Now I'm probably going to solder it right there. So I'm going to snip off this excess first because we're not going to need it anyway. So I'm going to go about to right there. There you go. Primary input, woofer output, ribbon output. That's the entire crossover. Okay, the next step is take your chassis. Now I'm going to use the chassis that has the binding post holes drilled out, because when we assemble it, I want everyone to see how to assemble the binding post as well. If you've got the speakers kit with the stand, these holes will not be drilled in your chassis. The holes will be in the bottom of the stand instead. So the people who got the stands, your speaker kit will look just like this. No holes at all. People that did not get the stand, you will have binding post holes. Okay? So find and insert your little foam backer plate. This needs to go in to make sure that the crossover, none of the components on the back ever short out to the chassis. Even though it's powder coated, I'd rather be safe than sorry later. So very simple. The holes are already perforated in the foam. All you gotta do is go in, press it in over top of the little standoffs, and it pretty much just keeps itself in place. Very, very simple. Okay, there you go. It goes in, it pretty much stays in. And then your crossover. You got the 4 crossover screws, which again are the 3mm by 4mm screws that will hold the crossover in. Okay, and I believe these take a 2mm or 2.5mm hex head. If you don't do this part first, you're going to regret it, because you really won't be able to get in past the drivers to mount the screws later. So I definitely recommend you putting your crossovers in before you put any drivers into the chassis. Okay. Again, the holes in the little plastic piece, they line up with the holes in the chassis. Probably hard to kind of see on the camera. If you see down in there, the holes line up quite nicely. Just make these little magnets a little bit better on these things. Not as good as they used to be. Okay. And I recommend leaving it loose and get them all started. I do that with everything. If you ever tighten a screw down before you get the rest of them started, you'll always run into problems down the road. So I always try to leave all my screws loose. So I've got them all started, then start torquing down on everything. Always the last one hard to get started, but there you go. Just get them snug. You don't have to crazy torque down on these when they're not going to go anywhere. That's it. Now you got the crossover installed. Now the fun part. Binding posts, speakers. Okay, now for those who have the binding posts, you're going to want to probably install those next. If you don't have the binding posts, you can kind of skip forward to the drivers. But got your binding posts, pretty simple. Each one of them has a plastic grommet that'll go through the chassis so that you don't short anything out. Now, what I recommend you do is take your positive wire. Okay, this is the one that's going to go to the binding post. Put your parts onto the wire first, and then feed it through the hole and solder it outside. It'll be much easier than trying to do all this internally. Okay, if you forget to put those on, you're going to spend all the time soldering it, and then you're going to realize you forgot the part inside. Yeah.